What we're going to focus on in this video is poor performance. What do you do when somebody is not performing to an acceptable level? Let's explore some key issues when it comes to managing poor performance. First of all, what I want to emphasize is the need to get balanced feedback. As well as addressing the poor performance, we have to acknowledge those elements of good performance. Because it's highly unlikely that somebody's practice is going to be entirely poor. There will be positive elements as well. So, it's helpful to get balanced feedback, to acknowledge the good practice and again to build on that good practice, to look at how to make it even better, while also identifying areas for development, in other words, aspects of practice that may not be acceptable in terms of quality, quantity of work, approach to work or whatever. Acknowledging that there are strengths as well as areas for development is an important part of this. And that's what I mean by giving balanced feedback. The next point takes us back to something that was mentioned earlier, which is the importance of giving constructive feedback. This is not about punishing somebody. It's not about blaming somebody. It is about identifying an area for development, some aspect of that practice that you are not happy with, and then giving them guidance on how to move forward, how to improve and supporting them in doing so. If we don't do this, then an appraisal will fail in its task of producing the best outcomes and helping the workers to be the best they can be. What it will do is create barriers. It will create tension. It will perhaps create a sense of resentment about appraisal. So, it has to be constructive, the feedback has to be constructive, it also has to be specific. So, giving specific feedback is very useful. For example, if somebody says I need to change my attitude, that there's something wrong with my attitude, I probably wouldn't know what they meant. But if they were to say to me something like, when you're dealing with members of the public, you need to be a bit more patient and a bit more polite in the way you speak to them, then that's going to be much more helpful. And if they can pin it down specifically to things that I'm saying or doing that come across as impatient or impolite, that's going to be even better. So, specific feedback is much more helpful than just something general or vague. It has to be positive and constructive. It has to be specific if it's going to be helpful. Then what we need to do is to support the employee in making the necessary changes. Just telling them that they need to do X, Y, or Z without supporting them in doing that may not be particularly constructive or helpful, but if we give them some tips on what they might do, for example, talk to members of the public more politely or in a more patient way and how their body language may need to change, and give them a specific example about something that is giving the impression that they have been patient. Something like talking very fast, for example. So, the more specific, the more constructive we can be, and then what we need to do is support them in making the necessary changes. This is part of the process that appraisal is all about. We also need to keep things in perspective and we need to look at the overall picture. If somebody's performance is not as good as it should be, how significant is that? Some people I've come across tend to react very strongly to somebody who is not performing in the way that they would like them to. We need to keep things in perspective. We need to recognize that everybody will make mistakes. Everybody will have areas for development. Everybody will struggle at times with certain aspects of their work. And our job is to help them to move forward positively with that. And so to do that, we need to keep things in perspective. We've got to be careful that we don't overreact. We don't attach too much significance to particular issues, because if we create the impression that we are having a go at that person, if we are in some way criticizing them, doing them down, then the whole idea of appraisal falls apart. That's not going to help us achieve the best outcomes and help that person be the best worker they can be. And we can become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So, there you have some important issues to consider in terms of managing poor practice, of trying to make a person's performance as positive as possible. It can be difficult at times to do this. It can be sensitive and touchy to basically tell somebody that what they're doing is wrong or unhelpful, but it has to be done, otherwise they won't improve. And if they're not improving, appraisal isn't working.